Hello and welcome to our program. Through this special debate series, we've been tracking the latest developments towards denuclearization and peace on the Korean Peninsula for about a month now since the historic April 27 Inter-Korean Summit. On our very last episode, we will assess the gap between Pyongyang and Washington and discuss its implication on future denuclearization efforts.
In recent months, there have been major progress in efforts to bring lasting peace to the Korean Peninsula. Since the landmark April 27th Inter-Korean Summit, there has been a visible thaw in relations between Pyongyang and Washington as the two sides prepare for denuclearization talks. However, complicating the negotiations is their stark differences on denuclearization. President Moon Jae-in, who had been playing the mediator role between North Korea and the U.S., also acknowledged that it will be an uphill battle for the two sides to reach a compromise.
산의 정상이 보일 때부터 한 걸음 한 걸음이 더욱 힘들어지듯이 한반도의 완전한 비핵화와 완전한 평화에 이르는 길이 결코 순탄하지 않을 것입니다.
The most notable sticking point between the two is their differences in the approach to denuclearization.
Well, all-in-one would be nice, I can tell you. I'm not going to go beyond that. It would certainly be better if it were all-in-one. Does it have to be? I don't think I want to totally commit myself, but all-in-one would be a lot better.
Washington wants an all-in-one approach towards CVID, or complete verifiable and irreversible denuclearization, as well as the shipping of nuclear weapons out of North Korea for dismantling. North Korea, on the other hand, prefers an incremental approach combined with incentives along the way. How much the two are able to narrow their differences will determine the success of future negotiations. Another gap is on what Pyongyang will get in return for abandoning its nuclear weapons. In addition to security guarantees, U.S. President Donald Trump has repeatedly highlighted potential economic rewards North Korea stands to gain from denuclearization. However, North Korea has reiterated security assurances as its top priority.
자신들이 비핵화를 할 경우에 미국에서 적대 관계를 종식하고 체제 안전을 보장하겠다라는 것에 대해서 어떻게 신뢰할 수 있는가라는 것에 대한 걱정이 있다고 봅니다.
Reaching an agreement on exactly how to guarantee the security of Kim's regime will be another major issue. On a road to peace, we assess the key differences in Pyongyang and Washington's positions on denuclearization talks and predict future developments surrounding the Korean Peninsula.
For today's discussion, we're joined by two experts. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
joining today. So to begin, the most critical sticking point between Pyongyang and Washington has been the definition of denuclearization. Dr. Lee, how is Pyongyang's idea of denuclearization different from that of Washington's CVID, which is complete, verifiable, and irreversible denuclearization?
Well, thank you for asking a very good question to think about, because the question itself reflects a very common yet mistaken narrative on the matter. I think another way to frame the question is whether North Korea understands the demands from the United States.
Right.
I think North Korea conceptually does, but North Korea has not articulated whether it has accepted it or not, because the deal is not complete, it's ongoing, and there is a price for denuclearization. And also, the U.S. position has shifted from A to B. The previous U.S. position is so-called Libya model. That is, North Korea, you give up on nuclear weapons first, and then we will sit down and think about what we will give as a reward for denuclearization. North Korea vehemently protested it. Now they're entering a so-called Trump model, make North Korea prosperous and guarantees national security. But Trump has not articulated in details what that might be. So I think they are in discussion right now.
Professor Chu,
Yes.
U.S. President Donald Trump appears to have kind of backed away from his initial demands, which are very demanding.
Yes.
Then do you think North Korea and the U.S. will sometime, maybe before or during the U.S.-North Korea summit, reach a compromise or an agreement?
Yes, I think there will be a compromise between the two countries. Just like Dr. Lee pointed out, there was a significant shift in Donald Trump's position on this particular matter, and I think North Korea is welcoming the idea of Trump model, and I think they're coming forward to really materialize this upcoming summit. So if that's the case, if North Korea really comes forward for this meeting, I think then there will be a significant compromise made between the two countries. Otherwise, it won't happen.
So you're kind of pessimistic on that point.
A little bit.
The North Korean regime's security has emerged as a very important factor that could alter the results of the North Korea-U.S. summits. Dr. Lee, Trump has pledged security guarantees in return for Pyongyang's denuclearization, but are Washington's security guarantees exactly what Pyongyang actually wants and demands?
North Korea depends on nuclear deterrence for regime survival, and it's the only deterrence it has. Giving up on nuclear weapons makes North Korea very vulnerable. U.S. wants complete denuclearization, CVID. North Korea wants a complete guarantee of its security, CVIG guarantee for denuclearization. I think North Korea wants something beyond the personal assurances of Donald Trump for Kim Jong-un's safety. What if Trump steps down? What will happen? The case of Libya was not very helpful.
Then Trump not only security guarantees, but has also promised economic benefits in return for CVID. What kind of benefits are they, and how big would they be for Pyongyang?
It'll be very enticing to North Korea, especially if you consider the economic conditions of North Korea nowadays. So it'll be very enticing because it will include a package from the economic aid to assistance and loans and humanitarian aid and food, energy, and everything. It'll be a complete package for a total nation building or makeover of North Korea. But it'll be a long way to go project because, you know, the United States, if it decides to lift up the sanctions, then it would have to persuade basically three audiences. One is the United Nations, and number two is the United States Congress, and three, he could go unilateral with executive orders, but the executive order is very limited in effect. So, you know, he has a lot of audience to persuade, and in order to really persuade these audience to come to his term, then he would have to really come up with concrete and solid commitment, both from himself as well as Kim Jong-un.
Then from what we know, we hear that there are mixed interpretations within Washington on what those economic rewards would be, such as there could be private investment or economic aid. Would these differences be problematic in the future for the two leaders, the two countries?
Well, potentially, but when it comes to economic aspect of the deal, there's very little the U.S. does. What U.S. does is the legal aspect of lifting the economic punishment in the format of U.S.-led UN sanctions against North Korea. But lifting it allows North Korea to do business with other countries, trade with other countries. For example, North Korea has a lot of coal to sell. North Korea has a cheap labor that other countries go and build factories and make some productions. North Korea can also, as Professor Chu mentioned, can apply for loans from the World Bank. So these are the legal restrictions that U.S. has imposed. The burden of economic shouldering of economic package actually mostly done by North Korea's immediate neighbors such as China, South Korea, and Japan. Those countries usually do business with North Korea, likely to do business with North Korea given that they're geographical proximity.
I'd like to move over to the
Yes.
topic of China. China is a big key factor in our talks.
Yes.
So China continues to stay relevant in the planned summit, or should I say, is trying to stay relevant in the loops concerning these summits. But Professor Chu, I assume Seoul and Washington's recent rapid movements and developments are really surprising Beijing and making it caught off guard.
Yes, but didn't everybody get caught off guard?
I guess the whole
with all
entire
these
international
developments?
society,
Yes. One day it'll be on, the next day it'll be off. But yes, China is somewhat surprised by Trump's move, of course, over the past few months, and they're delighted, and then they were disappointed at one point. But China is more relaxed, I think, more relaxed than speculations read of China's attitude, because China knows that they cannot be irrelevant. China cannot be irrelevant at all. When it comes to denuclearization, it has to be part of it. When it comes to economic building of North Korea, it has to be a significant part of it. It has its own stake. China knows it well. At this moment, I think they're restraining itself for further observation as to where this development is going to head towards to. I think that is what's really keeping China rather quiet than being voiceful.
I completely agree with Dr. Chu's observation. China is a country that is not accustomed to being sidelined when it comes to North Korean affairs, given its historical ties with North Korea. So this is a very awkward moment for China, or even upset, when China feels that it is being sidelined. In fact, that may not be the case, but when it feels it subjectively, and China will try very hard to stay relevant, including what we just saw, two surprise summits between Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un. Even Trump recently mentioned that China may be behind North Korea's defiant attitude during the steps in the negotiation. It's not very productive and helpful to make an effort to not include China, because China will stay and be relevant regardless of whether we want it or not. It will be there. One way to approach this issue that President Moon Jae-in has been working very hard to mediate the relationship between North Korea and the United States. That's a very tough task, but given his role, maybe he may also try to mediate the relationship between China and the United States as well, because as you mentioned, there might be a talk of war between China and the United States amid the deepening conflict of interest and rivalry and competition between number one power and number two power.
President Donald Trump believes that China has been behind the change of attitude in recent weeks in Pyongyang, and he would definitely try to exempt China's influence from the picture, right? So are you saying that there's nothing that President or that Washington can do in order to get China's influence out of the picture?
Well, your question includes some assumptions about what Washington might do. The danger is that if China feels that it is further excluded from this game, because some stakeholders in Washington believes that China's role is not very helpful, so we should make much harder to exclude China, then China will work much harder to be included in the game. What I'm concerned is that the things and the deals that U.S. Will put on the table, China will preemptively can also offer to North Korea, for example, economic package. Actually, China can provide a lot more economic aid to North Korea. Security guarantee. China can tell North Korea, if the deal between Donald Trump does not work out, don't worry about it, I'll protect you. And that is not a very good scenario that we want to anticipate. So that's why I maintain the position that China has been helpful to a certain extent, not as the level that we have expected, but then China is a stakeholder. It will be there. It will be stay relevant. So, and it's a multilateral effort to disarm North Korea's nuclear weapons. So let's do it as a team.
Then, Professor Chu, would you
Yes.
like to add anything?
I think Trump is really aware of the number of players that are involved here and who has stakes in North Korea and who has not. He's very clear with that. And along the course, he has mentioned a few times that every time there was a contact with North Korea, that he would immediately get in contact with Japanese leader, Chinese leader, and South Korean leader, and so forth. But you know, when North Korea changed its attitude, then that's when he went berserk. But I think here's a picture. He knows that denuclearization issue and any kind of compromise should be made between the United States and North Korea alone, and everybody else should be kept out. But when it comes, once that agreement is reached, and when we're playing a real game of denuclearization and giving out rewards to North Korea, then I think he's going to invite all the players, all the involved associated players here. So I think he's very clear with that. I think he's trying to make that statement not only to China, but also to North Korea. So while we're engaging in direct talks with you, North Korea, you just concentrate on us, and instead of trying to consult with others like Russia or China.
You just said that when we're down to making the actual nuclear deal,
Yes.
all the regional players will be invited.
Yes.
Does that also cover maybe Russia and Japan?
Yes, it'll have to. It'll have to. It'll have to. Trump has also stated prior to China, Japan, South Korea summit that was held a few weeks ago in Tokyo, that if North Korea decides to go denuclearization, then Trump made it clear that China, Japan, South Korea will be the major investors to North Korean project. He made that clear. So he didn't exclude anybody here.
The planned summit between U.S. President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is back on. Many believe the meeting will be a turning point in the peace process unfolding on the Korean Peninsula. Plans for a North Korea-U.S. summit hit a snag when Trump abruptly called off the meeting. But they got back on track after Pyongyang expressed a strong willingness to hold talks, paving the way for what will be the first meeting between a North Korean leader and a U.S. president. Following the tumultuous events in recent weeks, the Kim-Trump summit will finally happen, and all eyes are focused on what the high-stakes meeting will deliver.
What needs to be done in order to ensure the success of the long-anticipated historic meeting?
They would have to come to a conclusion with an attitude of CVI here, complete, verifiable, and irreversible. It has to be irreversible. Their commitment has to be solid and lasting forever. And despite the possible, leadership change in the United States 2 years down the road, and whether it be a Republican or a Democrat, they would have to really respect and uphold the agreement that was reached between the United States and North Korea and Singapore. I think that would be critical.
Well, this is a high-stakes game, a high-brain game, and many people, I think, mistakenly believe that this is a technical issue, dismantling nuclear weapons. That's it. I don't think so. I think this is a trust issue. What if North Korea dismantles it, but then becomes suspicious about the United States and tries to rebuild the nuclear weapons? What if there is a genius North Korean scientist who memorized all the details about making nuclear bombs, and we don't know who that person is, and he just takes a few months and rebuilds complete another bomb, much more advanced bomb? So this is not a technical issue. This is a trust issue. Many people also mistakenly think that this is science of dismantling nuclear weapons, denuclearization. I think this is an art that requires a political decision on the part of Trump and Kim Jong-un. These two leaders' personal dynamics will be very important. Trump's and Americans, they have very little contact with the North Koreans, and they don't know the system, and they don't know the North Korean way of propaganda and dynamics and psychology. It's very helpful for them to meet. So that's why I am an advocate of support of a meeting just for the sake of meeting. And I anticipate that when they meet in Singapore, there will be an agreement in principle. But that does not necessarily solve everything, given the deep mistrust and the complexity of the details about denuclearization, which Dr. Hecker at Stanford, with whom I spent a year as a fellow, he anticipates that it'll take about 15 years for dismantling nuclear weapons. So we should anticipate this is not one quick one-shot deal. This may take a longer term that also requires patience.
You just mentioned Dr. Hecker's research. I also read the report by him and his colleagues. Do you really think, because some people say that 15 years, it's kind of a very pessimistic review, and a lot of analysts are also saying that it could take a year's less as long as North Korea complies to it and cooperates with the international community. Do you really think it'll take more than a decade for when North Korea really becomes sincere in disarmament of its nuclear facilities?
Dr. Hecker visited Pyongyang and saw the nuclear facilities 4 times. So I think he's someone who knows what he's talking about. And secondly, I think that's why, as I mentioned, the issue of trust is so important here. I think as Trump wants, we could speed up the process. If Trump makes a grand bargain with Kim Jong-un, and Kim Jong-un also trusts Trump, I think that we could speed up the process. I think the plan Washington is thinking about is to finish the deal significantly by the year 2020, which is the end point of his first term. I think that is, to a substantial degree, realizable if we could reach a substantial agreement.
Professor, do you also think that maybe if as long as North Korea is willing to do so, that it would disarm its nuclear facilities within President Trump's term?
Oh, no, I don't think so. I don't think that's going to happen, because it means North Korea completely surrendering its military power. And I don't think that deal will be really acceptable and pleasant to Kim Jong-un, unless, there's a really concrete and verified, commitment strongly coming from Washington. I don't think that's going to happen, because here we're talking about weapons of mass destruction as well as nuclear weapons. So giving up all these weapons it means, North Korea completely surrendering to the United States. I don't think it's going to take 15 years, like Dr. Hecker said, because if he is saying, it's going to take more than a decade, then it implies that North Korea has much greater nuclear capacity than Libya. Libya, it took only 3 to 4 years. So when we're talking about 15 years, more than a decade, then it means there's going to be greater pie that Kim Jong-un has to give up. And that's going to be really difficult for Kim Jong-un.
Even if President Trump gives a lot of economic rewards and benefits, that will still be impossible.
Yes, there's always, when it comes to economic reward, North Korea has an alternative. That is China. Yeah. So,
Professor Chu, thank you for sharing your insights with us today.
Thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Lee, for joining us.
Well, my pleasure.
We're taking an unprecedented step towards denuclearization, but hopefully the ongoing efforts by relevant countries will come to positive results and bring long-awaited peace to the Korean Peninsula. Thank you for watching.